So today's lesson, we want to continue our work with angles, and specifically how we're going to prove angles congruent. Our objective for the day, we're going to prove and use theorems about angles, including vertical angles are congruent, supplements and complements of congruent angles are congruent. You can see our standard today, prove and apply theorems about lines. So today we start talking a little more logic and we talk about a theorem. A theorem is a conjecture or statement that you prove to be true. And we do this by using deductive reasoning. Our first theorem that we use today is the vertical angles theorem. Now we did a little bit of this in chapter 1, that we learned what vertical angles were, and we learned that they are congruent. Well, today we just kind of formalize it. The vertical angles theorem states vertical angles are congruent. Now, remember, vertical in this case doesn't mean up and down. It means two angles that are across from each other, like 1 and 3 when two lines intersect. Also, 2 and 4. So anytime that two lines intersect, it forms two pairs of congruent vertical angles. Here's the formal proof. Given that 1 and 2 are vertical angles, well, remember, 1 and 3 are a linear pair, which means they have to add up to 180. But so are 2 and 3. So if we did a little substitution, 1 plus 3 has to equal 2 plus 3 because they both equal 180. Then if we take off angle 3 from both sides, we get that angle 1 is equal to angle 2. And thus we've proven that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2 because that's what congruent angles are. They're equal in measure. Let's put it into work. What is the value of x? So what I want you guys to be able to do is look and say, okay, I have a pair of vertical angles. By the vertical angles theorem, vertical angles are congruent. So I can set 2x plus 42 equal to 3x minus 10. Then we're just doing algebra. So we'll subtract the 2x off because it's smaller than 3x. Then we'll add 10 to both sides, and we discover that x equals 52. Our next theorem talks about supplements. Remember, two angles are supplementary if they add up to 180. So our theorem states that if two angles are supplements of the same angle or congruent angles, then the two angles are congruent. Which we kind of use this back here. Notice that 1 and 3 and 2 and 3 are both supplementary. So 1 and 2 are both supplementary to 3, which means that 1's congruent to 2. That's what this states. If 1 and 2 are supplements and 2 and 3 are supplements, then 1 is congruent to 3. Same thing applies with complements. Two angles are complementary to the same angle or to congruent angles, then they are congruent. So 4 and 5 both add up. If the measure of 4 plus the measure of 5 equals 90, making them complementary, and the measure of 5 plus the measure of 6 equals 90, making them complementary, then 4 is congruent to 6. Other theorems that we use today. If two angles are congruent and supplementary, then each is a right angle. And all right angles are congruent because every right angle measures 90 degrees, therefore all right angles are congruent to each other. Final problem for the day. We use theorems to solve for x and y. So if we take a look at our diagram, y plus 23 and 63 are vertical angles. So by the vertical angle theorem, they equal each other. Thus, y would have to equal 40, 63 minus 23. Notice that these two angles form a linear pair, so they are supplementary. So 2x minus 17 plus 63 has to equal 180. Notice our straight line here. Combining our like terms, 2x negative 17 plus 63 is 46. Then I'll subtract 46 to both sides. 2x equals 134, and x equals 67. That concludes today's lesson. You can now get started on your Math Excel.